How do you follow that? It's problematic. The question I suppose we're concerned with this symposium is how you get on in life, career success. So what do you need? You need IQ. People have been talking about talent and effort. Will that do? You need EQ and IQ. Bob would say you probably need a bit of psychopathology and a hint of narcissism. I'm going to touch on one other characteristic, because I think if you look at the very successful people, Gorkin showed some people like Mr. Branson and these other entrepreneurs, what do they have in common? Well, they're clever, talented, articulate, slightly psychopathic, narcissistic, but they're quite good looking. And my task is to look at this literature on physical attractiveness in the workplace, and whether it advantages you. Here are some questions. Does physical attractiveness advantage people at work? Are they more likely to be selected for jobs? The good-looking people get more selected than others. Have you been to a very good British university? It's called Oxford. You'll notice there the students are much more attractive than at not such good-looking universities. Does that play any part in their selection? Does physical attractiveness count more than being competent at work? Can you compensate? If you're really, really attractive and not very bright, will it make an effect on whether you've been selected or not? Does physical attractiveness advantage females more than males? I'm not going to go there. Does intelligence moderate the relationship between attractiveness and work success? Well, what are the attributes of attractive people? We know there's a huge literature going back 40, 50 years. Attractiveness does seem linked to mental health. I always ask people, have you ever been to a mental hospital or been to a prison? One of the characteristics you'll find is nobody's attractive in those places. It's related to social anxiety, it's related to popularity, and it's related one way or another to a variety of forms of sexual activity, but not necessarily to social sociability or locus of control. We know that attractive adults and children are judged to be, this is in the eye of the beholder, more intellectually competent. You get a halo effect. More emotionally adjusted, more interpersonally competent, and more socially appealing. Well, we know that sort of stuff. Here's an interesting question, a little study I've seen recently. Can you judge the success of a company from the facial attractiveness of the photograph of the CEO? And the answer is yes. What you do is you go to company reports, big companies, small companies, you cut out the photograph of the CEO. By the way, if they're narcissistic, the photographs are bigger and taken some years ago. And you correlate this with not the GDP, you correlate it with the profitability of the organization. Hey, surprise, surprise, sociologists have found that attractive people seem to run bigger companies. Well, let me say a few words about the psychology of attractiveness. I owe a lot of these ideas and slides to my colleague Furnham Swami. We've written a book on the psychology of attractiveness. And I'll tell you a little bit about my tour of this area. The ancient Greeks believed that mathematical proportions gave you attractiveness. And in the 18th, 19th century, it was beauty in the eye of the beholder. But then, since our friend Darwin, we had evolutionary psychology. And by night, I don't become a trait psychologist, I become an evolutionary psychologist, because I'm very interested in this area. And one of the questions I want to look at and show you a few not very good studies of mine are unfair biases against people who are not that attractive, particularly associated with physical weight. What is beautiful is good. And an evolutionary factor and reality, mate selection theory, good gene theory, differential parental solicitude theory, all will predict that you select people not only to mate with, but to work with on the basis of their attractiveness. Well, the question is, if attractiveness is the independent variable, what's a good dependent variable? Well, you can try income, salary, wages, whatever term you prefer. You can try pre-selective recruitment. These studies are relatively easy to do. You can try career progression, or you could try something also easy, sales performance. And then the question is, what are the markers? So that's the dependent variable. What are the independent variables? Well, you could have a general measure of attractiveness, self-rated, which works okay-ish. I will say a few words about height. Well, I won't say a few words right now. Some of you might know that wonderful study by Tim Judge on height and career success. And what he showed was that for every inch a male is above 5 foot, he earns $789 a year. And if you work it up over a lifetime, that if you are 6'6" as opposed to 5'5", and forgive the old money, you earn $160,646 more. So being tall helps in life. Fitness, I'll talk about in a moment, health and longevity. Okay, I'll just show you a few of these studies we've played with, because they're quite pretty pictures. You might know the stuff on symmetry, and that we're all asymmetrical in various bits and bobs here and there, and that asymmetry is a measure of attraction. There's quite a lot of studies showing how particularly symmetrical faces are thought to be a measure of attraction, and there are interesting theories as to why symmetry is actually a good measure of psychological and mental health. I want to tell you a little story of a failed research career I had with the waist-to-hip ratio. I backed the wrong horse. I published 6 to 8 papers fighting my corner on the waist-to-hip ratio versus the body mass index, and I lost. The waist-to-hip ratio, there's a man called Singh recently died, and he argued very strongly for the waist-to-hip ratio of 0.7. And if you had a range for females between 0.67 and 0.8, this was thought of as maximally desirable. And there's all sorts of interesting biological explanations as to why that it should be the case. And he related to physical illness, to conditions affecting reproductive status, and that men are very clever and quick at detecting WHR. And you see WHR changes with women over time. It's basically a very quick, profound measure of fecundity. And fecundity is a good thing if you're a male at a particular age. Well, here are the sort of games we played. This is a fun study. This is varying WHR and weight. So you see 0.7, 0.8, 0.91, and we're waiting, and you can see by the weight of the legs and the arms that they're getting fatter. So we're trying to simultaneously move WHR and BMI. So we try to do the study saying which works best, WHR or BMI, which one accounts for most variance in ratings of attractiveness. So the maximally unattractive woman is there. At the bottom, you probably can't see her. She's got a very bad WHR. She looks old. Well, the trouble with this methodology is, and we lost the game because, of course, these two things are confounded one with another, and it depends on the stimuli you use. And we lost the game against our enemy Tovey at the University of Newcastle because he used better measures, which I'll show you in a moment. Well, we argued that the waist-to-hip ratio was the first wide filter. It was a first-pass filter. If you had somebody, the WHR was right, then you looked at other things as well. So you looked at all the other slightly more subtle aspects of attractiveness that men are looked at. So you looked for symmetry, you looked for skin, you looked for hair color, etc., etc. And we played with all those games. But unfortunately, and it's not culturally varied, by the way, if I've got time I might mention some cultural stuff. So here are some pretty pictures of people with good WHR, and it's very universal. You can see that Egyptian model's got a good WHR. We've actually done some wonderful studies of Rubens. We put Rubens women on diet and fiddled around with them and shown them to people. So if you show people the genuine Rubens, whose women are slightly tubby to our modern eye, in fact maybe even pregnant, and you slim them down a bit and you show them to people, actually Rubens was right. They do prefer a little fatter women. The best study we've done, I think, no doubt, is the one where you go to a student cafeteria before lunch and you ask people how hungry, you ask men how hungry they are, you show them a series of pictures with the women getting fatter and fatter, controlling for all the other variables, and then you collect another group after lunch, and what you see is that women's attractiveness goes up as they get tubbier up to a point. So hungry men like tubby women. So the moral of the story is, girls, don't get worried about your weight, just keep your men hungry. Well, we played all these fancy games. We had 2 levels of, we did a study on facial attractiveness and levels of WHR, and it all worked really, really nicely, and WHR always won. And the reason why WH won was because of our bloody stimuli. The stimuli were such that we were co-varying things which in nature couldn't be co-varied. So we had to give in, and these are real students' pictures. There they are. They're not a lot very attractive, but what we know about them is we know about their WHR, can you see their WHR, and we know about their body mass index. And then we could use those in further studies of rating people on their body mass index and WHR. What is happening? Ah, here we are. Okay. Let me tell you of two very trivial little studies we've done on this topic, just out of interest. This was using these photographs. And the photographs are the stimulus materials and have to be rated for one way or another. We asked people to look at those photographs, I'll go back to them, and the question was which ones how do they get rated? So they had to be rated for whether they were getting teased, lonely, or lazy. And what you see there, and it's the lazy one, which I think is quite an interesting one relevant to the seminar, is that as they get bigger, tubby people are thought of as lazy. They don't get off their backsides because they're so heavy and they can't move very fast. And so that's the male data, and that's the female data. Well, we did another study, also using the photographs, on likelihood of occupational hiring for a managerial post. So you show people these pictures, and this is the sort of thing you get. So you get occupational hiring, and this is the emaciated through underweight, overweight, etc., obese. So I suppose it's not that surprising that you get this finding. Well, we upgraded our slides, thanks very much to Angie, his husband, and we did, this is the boob job one. So this is we're now varying breast size as well as hip to waist ratio and so on and so forth. And breasts make something of a difference, chaps, which you probably know, but it's not enough to make nothing overpowers WHR. I beg your pardon, BMI. BMI is the really important one. Men's attractiveness is primarily determined. So let's talk about men, the selection of men. What's the bottom line so far? The social psychologists have been on this for a very long time. There is attractiveness discrimination. It's particularly the case with weight, but you can do it very, very subtly with other things as well. If you present people under a whole range of circumstances for a whole range of issues, whether it's selection, promotion, whatever, yes, attractiveness makes a difference. Well, what about chaps? Well, what women are interested in is the V shape. It's the upper body masculinity, and why that's important. Well, I'll just show you, there's Ruben's Women's on Diet. But I'll show you the men. We haven't got time. This is quite a fun one we did, and this is about leg to torso ratio. One of the interesting things was models. Some of you might have noticed models on catwalks. Not only are they tall, but they have a very strange and unusual pre-puberty leg to torso ratio. So as women's leg to their torsos change, so their attractiveness goes up. Whereas as men's leg to their torso goes up, their attractiveness goes down. So that was a little study we were looking at on one of these related issues. Well, here's the answer then. Physical traits make a difference. Physical characteristics and attractiveness make a difference. But what about personality? And we have sitting in the front row here, or near the front row, the author or the co-author of this paper. What if you describe people? You show you've got body weight index, you've got people getting tubbier and tubbier. You can fiddle around with their waist to hip ratio, and then you describe them as introverts or extroverts, or conscientious or not conscientious, or whatever. And this is what we found, the effect sizes for these variables. The effect size for body weight blows everything out the water, but personality had quite an important impact. So even if she's tubby, if she's got a nice personality, that's okay, and the WHR has little effect on the whole thing. Well, there are, of course, this is the question about the non-physical traits. And if you're hiring somebody, to what extent you would hire them on their personality, on their ability, on their grit, or on other characteristics as well, voice, clothing, social dominance. Here's a little study which is quite fun. Would you hire this woman or this man? And this is we've done work on tattooing. This is on piercings. And the question is, how do you rate these people? So this one is pierced. This is the earring one, so she's got an earring and a lip thingamajig and an earring and lip thingamajig or whatever. Some of you might know more about this than I do. And here you have them rated, various ratings on various variables. So these are ratings of intelligence as a function of piercings. Moral of the story, don't get pierced. The more you get pierced, the less bright you thought of as being. It might be true that the more you get pierced, the less bright you are, or indeed that's the case with whatever. Okay, I've rushed through this. These are my co-authors on there. That's the brilliant Verin, who I've written this book with. Here's Golka, and here there's Dina. So the questions are, based on this information only, on the attractiveness physical ratings, who is the most attractive? who is the most intelligent, who has the prettiest girlfriend, who makes the most money, and who is most likely to succeed.